Baruch atah Asherah anat melcha ha'olam asher kedishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivani lehitatif l'tzitzit. Good morning, Nat. How are you? Good morning. Good morning, Freedom. What is your creamer made of? Kevin, this room is a room for a ritual, right? We do the same thing every morning. Say the same words every morning because the words ask us to say them, so we say them. And in so doing, we connect to one another and connect to old traditions which have since ceased being practiced in most of the world, in all of the world. I can't say we're actually practicing those old traditions. So old traditions are very different from what we're doing here today. No, I wouldn't call it Christianity. Pre-Christianity. We'll say some Jewish prayers, and we'll read from this book, right, a translation of the Enuma Elish, Babylonian mythology. And we'll also say some words from the Bhagavad Gita. It's fairly eclectic, but also repetitive and the same. Raw sugar, heavy whipping cream, milk, and vanilla. That sounds tasty. And you put it in coffee? So, we can start with words from the Book of Deuteronomy. So the Book of Deuteronomy was written in pieces between, broadly speaking, 700 and 500 BC, between the time of the destruction of the kingdom of Israel by the Assyrian Empire and the return of the Judeans to Jerusalem by the Persian Empire. And in the middle we have the Babylonian exile, right? So this book was written in a time of great political upheaval by a group of religious elites attempting to preserve their culture. Christianity is a racket. Before Christianity was paganism. I'm down with multiple gods. Yes, and also the Christians invented the word pagan, right? The term pagan is a Christian concept. In any case, let's say the Shema. Shema Yisrael Asher Eloheinu Yahweh Echad. Vahafta et Anat Elohecha ובכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך וחיו הדברים האלה אשר נוחי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך, ולכתך בדרך, ובשכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, וחיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך, ובשעריך. וחיה, כי ויחיו אלוהיך אל הארץ אשר נשבע אל אבותיך לאברהם ליצחק וליעקב, לתת לך ערים גדולות וטובות אשר לא בנית, ובתים מלאים כל טובה אשר לא מילאת, וברות עצובים אשר לא עשת, כהרים וזיתים אשר לא נטעת, והלכת ושבת, הישמר לך פן תשכח את יאמר אשר תשעך מארץ מצרים מבית עבדים. Yes, Kevin, in some traditions, in some Jewish traditions, it is customary to pray facing Jerusalem, which, broadly speaking, given that I am in New York, would mean facing east, but that is not a tradition that I follow. I don't necessarily care to pray to the ruins of an old temple. I'm praying to you, right? And I am facing you, right? I'm looking directly at the portal which brings my image to you. That is the direction that I'm facing. Right? This is not quite Judaism. It's something that derives from it, I suppose. Good morning, Jada. How are you? It's nice to see you again. It's been a few days. So, we're going to continue to read this story called Atrahasis. So we've been reading this story for a couple weeks now, right? So the story of Atrahasis details a number of things. It starts with the creation of the Tigris and Euphrates River. I'm glad you're here too. Right, so it starts with a division between the gods, between the Anunnaki and the Igigi. These were two categories of ancient Mesopotamian deities. The Anunnaki were the high deities, and the Igigi were the low deities, roughly speaking. Or at least what this story tells us is that the Igigi were enslaved. Right, they were digging out the riverbeds of the Tigris and Euphrates River, and they dug for 3,600 years. Right, a cycle of cycles. And after 10 times a year, 10 times 365, or, the Babylonians, they were interested in numerology, so we have these number patterns. In any case, at some point they decided to rebel. They said, this is silly. We don't want to be lower-class gods simply toiling on behalf of the high ones. Good morning, baby love. How are you? It's really nice to see you. So they started an army, and they surrounded the manor, the castle, of Enlil. And they bring their distress to the Anunnaki. And the Anunnaki, after much deliberation and repetition, say, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to create another lower class called humans. And the humans will be the ones who will do labor and toil. So the humans do that, right? There's this really beautiful poetic sequence that we just finished describing the creation of humanity out of mud and reeds, and then it gives them certain social roles. Husband and wife, talks about midwifery and birth, right? It's a creation story. And the creation concludes. And then 600 years pass, and humans, they live long and prosper. And they produce many more humans, and they start making a ruckus, right? Which is the similar driving narrative tool that we saw in the Enuma Elish, right? Like the gods were upset because their creations were too loud. They decided to destroy them. So the gods send a plague among the people, the shivering sickness, and everyone starts dying. And Enki, the trickster god, speaks to our hero, Atrahasis, and says, here's how you avoid the shivering sickness. And Atrahasis does as he's told, and the shivering sickness becomes no more. And now, where we're leaving off, it's the next bit, right? Because humans are still growing, and they're still being loud, and Atrahasis is still the hero, and Enki is still going to advise him, and the other gods still think that humans should be dead. And so now, finally, after much preamble, we get to the flood portion of the story. Right? I've said every stream for a while that this is a very ancient version of the story of Noah and the flood from the Book of Genesis, so now we actually get to the flood part. It's exciting. All right. So here we go. 600 years, not even 600 years went by. The inhabited lands sprawled, and the people grew plentiful, and the inhabited lands raised a howl like a bellowing bull. But the god was annoyed by all the noise they made. Eliel had to put up with all of their loud clamor and chatter. Eliel raised his voice to be heard, speaking to the high gods. The noise which is made by man has become too great. All of this clamor and clatter has kept me from my sleep. Now let us make it so the humans will be denied their food, so that the growth will not be great enough to cure their hunger. I think I put my bookmark in the wrong place. I totally did. Well, you can just keep going. There's no harm in repeating. So that the growth will not be great enough to cure their hunger. Let it be so, that in the heavens Adad will withhold his rains, and beneath no subterranean water will gush from springs. Cause the winds to be unleashed and rage, denuding the soil. Let there be clouds aloft in the sky, but bring no rain. So the farmer's fields will yield hardly any crop to speak of. Let Nisaba hold back the nourishing flow from her breasts. There are no blessings which are bestowed unto them, so that their lives will be wretched and filled with misery. Then the gods sent messengers to Adad to withhold his rain, to Nisaba to withhold the nourishing flow of her breasts. And the winds were unleashed and raged, denuding the soil. There were clouds aloft in the sky, but they brought no rain, so the farmers' fields yielded hardly any crop to speak of. There were no blessings which were bestowed unto them, so that their lives were wretched and became filled with misery. Atrahasis raised his voice to be heard, speaking to his lord. How long are we going to be beset by this terrible famine? Is it their intention that we bear this syndrome from all time? Enki raised his voice to be heard, speaking to his servant. Bring together the elders. Gather you the men of rank, so as to instigate a rebellion within your own community. Send out messengers to announce that within every district, and cause them to raise a loud cry throughout the lands, that you will no longer pay fitting homage to your gods, that you will no longer beseech the favor of your goddesses, but rather find your way to the door of the rain god Adad, present him with a loaf of baked bread, leave a flour offering, and let him feel his own shame upon receiving these gifts, that he might remove you from his discredited hand. Atrahasis did as he was told, bringing the elders to his door, and he raised his voice to be heard, speaking to the elders. I have brought together the elders, the men of rank, so as to instigate a rebellion within our own community. Send out the messengers to announce this within every district, and cause them to raise a loud cry throughout all the lands, that you no longer will pay fitting homage to your gods, that you will no longer beseech a favor of your goddesses, but rather find your way to the door of the rain god Adad, present him a loaf of baked bread, leave a flour offering, and let him feel his own shame upon receiving these gifts, that he might remove from off of us his discredited hand, to condense a misty haze that will appear in the morning. So during the night he will go and beckon droplets of dew, as patron restore the fruitfulness of the land ninefold. Interesting. So I was wrong. It's just the book is very repetitive, so sometimes I think I'm reading a repetition, but it's actually just that the book is very repetitive. Right, so this is the same pattern that we saw in the beginning when the Igigi were rebelling against the Anunnaki, right? When you don't like what's happening, you rebel. That's the moral of the story. Anyway, Atrahasis is a leader of people, and he knows which gods to worship and which gods not. Good morning, Lady Legacy. How are you? Thus they erected a temple in the city dedicated to Adad, sent out messengers to announce this within every district, and caused them to raise a loud cry throughout all lands, so they no longer would pay fitting homage to their gods, so they no longer beseeched the favor of their goddesses, but rather made their way to the door of the rain god Adad, presented him a loaf of baked bread, left a flour offering, such that he himself felt shame upon receiving these gifts, so that he removed from off of them his discredited hand, and condensed a misty haze that appeared in the morning. So during the night he went and beckoned droplets of dew. As patron he restored the fruitfulness of the land ninefold. Thank you for the roses. So that the day of dryness passed, and the drought ended. Then, after this, the gods received again their daily offerings. And we'll leave it there. I promised you that we were going to get to the flood. I was wrong. The story is too long and too repetitive for that. We'll get to the flood next time. Right? Because after the gods start giving the right amount of rain, they will start giving too much rain. And that's how it goes, right? We've had a drought in North America for the last season, right? This has been the driest season in a very long time. But now, finally, a storm has blown in, and the drought has passed, at least on the East Coast. And in the meantime, there are terrible floods in Pakistan. So the world is full of drought and flood, as it was 4,000 years ago when these stories were written. Excuse me. I think I'm allergic to this prayer shawl, because whenever I come and do live stream, my nose starts running. It's rather embarrassing. So, thank you for the roses. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, your support of this work, of this stream, like, it does have an impact. I mean, each rose is worth, what, a fraction of a cent? But there are lots of ways to support this, right? There's a subscription button somewhere in TikTok, and there's a link in my bio to Patreon, and a link to a tip service if you want to just do a one-time payment. But when people do give these tiny little symbols, I do find it very reassuring, right? It reminds me that, yes, me spending my time in this way is valuable, is valued, and it does hold meaning. So thank you. So, Arati is next. We're going to say Arati. The word Arati means light or flame in Sanskrit. And Jaya means Jaya, right? Like, hooray. I offer a look into so much of that meaning. Well, thank you, Jada. Jada, you've known me here longer than anybody else, by far. And that's really special. But still, you think it's worthwhile to come hang out. Known. I mean, to the extent that you can know a person, right? Like, on another hand, I barely know you. Right? Like, I don't know what it means to know someone, but I certainly think of you more fondly than most of the people in the stream. That's clear. Thanks, Jamie. I hope you have a good day, too. On this planet since recorded history began. None of us have been on this planet since recorded history began. That's basically why I read the old stories, right? Like, I want to remind myself that I am connected to a lineage that is older than me and will continue to persist long after I'm gone, right? Like, it's a way of contextualizing my life and basically assuaging my fear of death, right? Like, I am afraid of death in a very deep sense, even though I think about it all the time and I don't. Like, sometimes I look forward to it. I didn't see the line before that. Was it deleted? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I'm afraid of death even as I often look forward to it. Oh god, being alive is so exhausting. I have to, like, be this individuated self and have all this suffering and exhaustion. It's dreadful. But when I read these old stories and say these old words, they remind me that my life is, one thread in a tapestry. It's a terrible metaphor. But, you know, one leaf on a tree, right? The tree is bigger than me, and yet I am the tree. Just as every cell in my body is part of me, and yet I am bigger than every cell in the body, right? So the lineage that I am a part of is bigger than me, even as I am it. And I think that's pretty special. And that's why I say these old words. So, excuse me. This prayer is from the Bhagavad Gita, or derived from it, right? Some of these words are definitely not from Dr. Punk. I said this was my favorite, and you listened, and now every time you give me a garland headpiece, and it makes me very happy. Thank you. So, these are derived from the Bhagavad Gita, which is approximately a 2,000-year-old text, right? But it was adapted by the theologians in the Shivananda tradition, and they added some Western holy figures to assuage the white people. And that is how I inherited this tradition in a context of Americanness. But much of this is from the Gita, so we will read it. And Jai means Jai, and Arati means light or flame. That could be a Mark Twain quote. Yeah, I believe that. I didn't mind before I was born, and I won't mind after I'm gone. Yeah, that's true. I mind now. Now is when I mind. Yes, it's fire time, Dr. Punk. Let's say Arati. Jaya Jaya Arati Vina Vinayaka Vina Vinayaka Shri Ganesha Jaya Jaya Arati Subramanya Subramanya Kartikeya Jaya Jaya Arati Venugopala Venugopala Venuola Papa Vidura Navanita Chora Jaya Jaya Arati Venkantaramana Venkantaramana Sankatarana Sitarama Radhe Shama Jaya Jaya Arati Gauri Manohara Gauri Manohara Bhavani Sankara Samba Sadashiva Uma Maheshwara Jaya Jaya Arati Raja Rajeshwari Raja Rajeshwari Tripura Sundari Mahalakshmi Mahasaraswati Mahakali Mahashakti Jaya Jaya Arati Anjaneya Anjaneya Hanumanta Jaya Jaya Arati Dattatreya Dattatreya Trimutri Avatara Jaya Jaya Arati Adityaya Adityaya Bhaskaraya Jaya Jaya Arati Sanistaraya Sanistaraya Bhaskaraya Jaya Jaya Arati Sankarachaya Sankarachaya Advaita Gurave Jaya Jaya Arati Sadgurunata Sadgurunata Shivananda Jaya Jaya Arati Vishnu Devananda Vishnu Devananda Vishnu Devananda Jaya Jaya Arati Agastya Munaye Agastya Munaye Shriyama Priyaye Jaya Jaya Arati Ayappa Samine Ayappa Samine Dharma Shastave Jaya Jaya Arati Jesus Gurave Moses Gurave Buddha Gurave Jaya Jaya Arati Muhammad Gurave Guru Nanak Gurave Samastya Gurubho Namaha Jaya Jaya Arati Venugopala. I had been dead for billions and billions of years before I was born, and had not suffered the slightest inconvenience from it. Were you dead or were you unborn? And is there a difference between the two? Thank you, Lady Legacy. I hope you have a lovely day. Natatrasya bhati natandrakaratam lema vidyobhati kutoya magni tvameva vantam invanti sarvam tasya bhasya samitam vivanti om gange kayamane kaiva govari saraswati narmade siddhi kaveri hiya namastutam namo namaha tvameva mata chapita tvameva Tvameva bandisha saka tvameva Tvameva vidya javinam tvameva Tvameva sarvam mama deva deva Kayena vacha manasendriyarva Buddhyatmanava prakriti sabhavad Karomi adyad mangalam parasmahi Narayana iti sarmarpayami Savadhamam pravichayam amekam savranam vraja Aham sva sarva papayo mokshayami masucha. Whatever actions I perform with my body, speech, mind, senses, my nature, my intellect, or my emotions, all these I dedicate to you. Thank you for being here with me. Thank you. So, now we will conclude with Kaddish. And today's Kaddish has a particular significance for me. My partner's grandfather died yesterday, around this time. And so, specifically, I am saying Kaddish for him. And we say Kaddish for all the people that we have lost all the things that we are not, which we wish we were, all the people we wish we still had contact with, but no longer do. And so we say a prayer of mourning together to remember and to connect to those of us that are still here. So the word Kaddish means holy or prayer. And my ancestors have been saying these words for at least 2,000 years in response to death. And they sound like this. Yid Kadal, Vid Kadash, Shema Rabba. Biama Divrachute, Viamlich Malchute, Bechayachon, Viamechon, Vchayadikol Be Israel, Bagala, Visman Kari, Vimru. Amen. Yehe Shema Rabba Mivarach Lialam, Omei, Omaya, Yid Barach, Vishtabach, Vid Baar, Vitarmam, Vitnase, Vitadar, Vitale, Vitalal, Shema, de Kudisha, Barichu. Leila min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, Jamiran Miyama Vimru. Amen. Yehe Shlama Rabba, Amin Shemaya, V'chayim Aleinu V'yachol Yisrael, Vimru. Amen. Ose Shalom Bimrama, Fuya Ase Shalom, Aleinu V'yachol Yisrael, Vimru. Amen. Ose Shalom Bimrama, Fuya Ase Shalom Aleinu, V'yalechol Yisrael, V'yimru, V'yimru, Amen. Thank you so much for joining me today, saying these words. And I will see you again tomorrow to say them again. I'm not going just yet. I'm gonna have some breakfast. I hope your day is wonderful too, Jamie. I don't know what my streaming schedule will be over the course of the next week because I have to go attend a funeral. I don't know what that will be like. But I will be on tomorrow. And yeah, so I can see you then. So if you give me a second, I will go get some grains. And we can chat over breakfast. I'll be right back. Breakfast, good idea. Breakfast is important. Sometimes I find it very difficult to eat enough calories throughout the day. So I live on a commune, and the kitchen is often unoccupied. And we have really lovely food. We have amazing food, but all of it is unprocessed, right? We've got potatoes that have been just harvested and need to be cleaned and then cooked for 2 hours, and carrots that are similarly dirty, or meat that needs to be cured before it can be eaten. Right? We have a lot of food that requires labor and time before you can eat it, and very little snack food. So sometimes it can be difficult to eat. Hi, Kumari Sharma. Kumari Sharma. That's a very beautiful name. We buy our grains. We don't have a tractor or any threshing equipment, right? Seed processing is a very technologically intensive operation. And yeah, so we grow a lot of vegetables, but we don't grow grains, we don't grow legumes. Things that are just can be much more efficiently done at scale, we don't do them. There are some people that I live with that would like to be totally self-sufficient, right? Would like to be plowing up the fields and doing everything so that we didn't ever have to go to the store. That's not something that I aspire to. In fact, I wish we had more purchased food in the house, because then it'd be easier for me to eat. You know, Dr. Punk, everyone has their own food difficulties. You know, some people want to gain weight, some people want to lose weight. I would love to be able to gain weight. Right? There's a dysphoria thing, right? Like I started taking hormones a little over 3 years ago, and I've been slowly watching the fat in my body redistribute. But because I have so little of it, it redistributes a lot slower. And so still, like, my limbs look more like male limbs than female limbs. That probably makes no sense to you, right? Because I'm looking at, like, the shapes of the shoulder blades and things. But dysphoria makes you very attuned to to certain shapes of fat and skin. It's ridiculous. So if you want to give me 10 pounds, I'd appreciate it. Particularly right here. Hey, Aurelia. I bet you're pretty cool, too. Thanks, Nat. Yeah, that's all it takes. You just will it. I'll share my body with you. Just through the ether. Poof. The number of cis women that have offered me their breasts. It's, several. It's funny. Everybody wants a different body. Very few people are like, yes, my body, this one, that's the one I want. I don't want it to change at all. Oh no. What is my favorite feature of my body? Of a body? It's an interesting question. It's a slippery slope kind of question. Both. Well, I mean, it's a little bit embarrassing, crude, I suppose, but growing breasts gave me more acute and simple joy than, like, literally any kind of body thing I've ever experienced. Like, just make me so happy. And sometimes they make me feel dumb because they're just like, they're just good. They're just like purely good in this like simple, visceral way that I don't really understand. Like, gender euphoria is real. And it is not cultural. Like it is like some weird subconscious thing. But yeah, my breasts make me happier than they ought to, than sense would allow them to. They're just very good. I'm eating millet. Right, like I don't know how to explain that on a live stream in a way that works with TikTok community guidelines, basically, right? Because like I don't want to get too explicit, but they're just really excellent. Hi, Jess Morther. How are you? I like seeing you here too. Appreciate it. So today, I am going to pack up Patreon rewards. I do that once every 3 months for an old Patreon account that I ran before I started making content on TikTok. I was making YouTube videos about communes under the channel name Commune Life, and I did that for about a year, and I still have a handful of patrons on that account who expect homestead goodies, basically. So once a season, like today, I'll be packing up garlic and dried fruit and other seasonal things, jam, stuff that the homesteaders around me have made and preserved. And I'm sending it out. I do that once every 3 months. And it's funny, like, it's kind of an onerous task, such that when I made the Patreon for this TikTok channel, I was like, nope, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to be mailing out things all the time, which I think was the right decision, but it's also puzzling because then it makes me unsure about how to talk about the active Patreon that I'm running, because I'm not offering anyone anything, right? I'm not offering them vegetables anymore, or raspberry preserves, or peanut butter, the kinds of things that I send out to. I think I just have two or three. I have to check, right? They always drop, because we're not really making much Commune Life content anymore. There's still a Facebook page that posts little blog posts and things, but I'm not making video content, and haven't for quite some time. So many of the patrons that I that found Commune Life through my video content are like, well, what am I doing with this? This is silly. I don't want to do this anymore. But there's still a few, and I think the few who continue to subscribe to that Patreon account do so because they like the food that I send them, basically, right? It's a strange kind of seasonal CSA. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to pack up some preserved fruit and root vegetables, and put them in a box, put it in the mail, send it to some folks. And then I will continue to work on my thesis, which is what I will be working on for the next 8 months. What are you up to today, Jada? Chores and organizing and hopefully some reading. There's a new fantasy book that's coming out next week that I'm really excited about. I read the first two. 300 pages into the overstory. Genetics, honey baby, basically. Like I do use hair products, like I use shampoo and conditioner and leave-in conditioner sometimes, and hair oil sometimes. What's the best? Sorry, I get distracted by the chat feed. I started reading this series, the Locked Tomb series by Tasman Muir. It's about lesbian necromancers in space. It's so campy and dreadful. But like I've never, like, I used to read a lot when I was younger, and I hadn't been grabbed by a narrative so intensely in like a decade. But I was not well over the winter, and I couldn't do much else but read, and so I started reading this book, and I just like was totally consumed by this narrative, and it was really important to be able to lose myself for a little bit during that time in the cold dark parts of winter. So the third installment is coming out. It's called Known in the Ninth. It gets released in 8 days or something. I'm very excited to read it. Like, Dr. Punk, I can't actually promise you that it's good. Like, I think it's excellent. Like, I think it's fantastic. But I think like my enjoyment of it had as much to do with my own mental state as it did the quality of the writing. But like I'd never read a book like that before. Like the writing was just so rich and accessible, and the characters were just really really compelling. And I like reading about fantasy lesbians because can relate. But Jada, I don't do much for my curls. Like, okay, I did like describe 3 hair products that I put in them, but like largely that's not to keep them curly. It's to keep them untangled, right? Because if I just sleep, then they get all messed up and tangly. So I have to wash my hair pretty regularly. And the only time I can brush my hair is when there's conditioner in it in the shower. Other than that, like if I try, like, yep, I'm stuck and that hurts. So I don't do that. So it's mostly just genes. I was born with this body and its peculiarities. Its strange convictions about itself. Did not ask for this body, and some parts of it are really great, and some parts of it are not so great. But we get the bodies we get. Alright. I think it's time for me to get on with my day. I have to pack up some Patreon rewards. So I'm gonna do that. But thank you so much for hanging out with me. It's really special that I get to do that. Yeah, you have a good one too. Yeah, and I will see you all tomorrow to say these words once more. Okay, farewell.